Personally, I feel like a lot of people vote Tory without that as a major consideration. I kind of like to give people at least some benefit of the doubt and believe that they are voting based on the issue that affects them most or that they feel is most important, and that once like that whilst we might see something as being the most important issue and you quite arguably looking after the most vulnerable is one of the most crucial things you can do in a civilized and developed nation. I feel like there's a it's this I don't want to call it the fake culture war, but like we kind of seem to be in this position where people on the right and the left will become stirred up over really fringe, tiny little things instead of looking at these big picture issues about like how we treat the vulnerable and out of work and disabled. And instead, we're caught up talking about free speech on campus that isn't under threat and probably won't be. Do you get what I mean?
Um, well, sure, everybody votes for a different party based on different policies that are being put forward. There's different reasonings for it. But when it comes to the Conservatives, they let's look at their previous manifestos.
Hmm.
They have not kept to the pledges that they've made to the British public whatsoever. But despite that, it will get the news, the media outlets, which are predominantly right wing in this country, will spin it in their favor, and people will always be left with a favorable impression of that party over another. I mean, it's an ongoing sick joke, frankly, that Rupert Murdoch brags every single time there's an election that, it's the son what won it kind of
Hmm.
headlines that, who we backed is who you chose. Well done. And he's done that since 1979, essentially. It was about just after I was born.
Hmm.
So I think it's a media narrative that needs challenging, and also politically, these pledges that are made need to be challenged when they are not met. And too often, these promises that people vote for parties on don't get kept, and there's no repercussions for that. I appreciate that it can be something of a thorny issue to say that manifesto pledges have to be honoured and that needs to be enforced. But truthfully, there needs to be some sort of way of meeting it halfway, perhaps. So, if you don't keep your promises, it needs to be made clear that they have not done this, that they've gone back on this, and it's not reported nearly enough.
I mean, I would say that that's probably the job of the press to do, and that like recourse that we have is the ballot box, and yeah, the press being a serious issue. I want to get on to something you mentioned there as well, is that the Tories came in and used austerity as a justification to make serious cuts to the welfare state, to public services, and to public spending as well. It's something actually I talked about in my book. I said that I predicted at least 2 years ago when I started writing it that we would be approaching some sort of crisis that the Johnson government would attempt to use to make further cuts to the welfare state, to sell off our state assets, and to further privatize as much of the British state as possible. Do you Are you concerned that that might be what happens now post COVID?
Well, we're not exactly post-COVID yet, are we? But we're already seeing these, some pretty pernicious, onerous actions coming out from the Johnson government, and some of that is due to, as I'm sure you are no doubt aware, having written a book on it, coming out of Brexit as well. Um, yeah, we have just recently seen the protests that we've had in Bristol and also Clapham Common, and they've had these the legislation that they wanted to pass to do away with protests, for example, and assault on our civil rights and assault on freedom of speech and freedom of expression, and that absolutely has to be stood against and called out. And certainly we have been. I've been doing that through my social media, and it's a subject that's come up numerous times on socialist telly as well. You can't take it lying down, and especially when you're in a political situation made all the more dangerous by the fact that the opposition is not opposing. It's too often in agreement and in tangent, walking in lockstep with the direction the government's taking. It makes it a pretty dangerous, pretty shaky place for people to live in the UK under this kind of an atmosphere.
Are you given any hope by the level of response to the kind of even suggestion that our right to protest and our freedom of speech was under threat with this policing bill? I was given like a minuscule amount of hope that for like the first time in I don't know how long, it seemed that the left and the right in Britain were on the same side of an issue. Whether they might disagree about a few little details of why the issue came up, we were all for a brief moment united in thinking that we got to like shut down this challenge to the right to protest.
Yeah, it affects all wings of the party. It doesn't matter which part of the political spectrum you sit on. Everybody goes out and protests about something for left-wing issues, for right-wing issues, for issues I would agree with, for issues I would vociferously disagree with. But the right to protest is there, and yes, it has given me a lot of hope that across the country there were pockets of resistance coming up everywhere, and obviously most notably in the news was what was going on in Bristol. The few nights that things were happening down there, and it was questionable as to where the blame was actually lying, especially in light of what had happened at Clapham Common shortly before, where the police had waded in far too heavily handed. And that first night in Bristol, when you saw the riot van on fire and the police station being attacked, it was very hard to say, well, this is a both sides argument. And, obviously, clearly things are happening in Bristol where the aggressors are coming from the protesters. And obviously that was something the media was able to latch onto quite readily. And the Conservative Party was as well, and the images and the media were putting out where we were fearing playing right into the hands of those who wanted to shut down protest. But actually, it went on a few more nights, and actually you see more and more amateur video footage of people who were actually there and seeing what was happening, and it was not as clear cut as all of that at all. And again, we saw some quite heavy-handed behavior from the police. I mean, they were pushing journalists around, National Union of Journalists, in one video. I've seen another video just today of a young woman who'd been battered with a riot shield.
Oh, wow. Could you send me that? And I'll stick that in the description for people.
But it was quite. There are it's not as clear cut as all that. And the right to protest has to be preserved. We have to continue to have our freedom of speech and our freedom of expression, and we have to be allowed to do that peacefully without fear of being attacked. I mean, some of the video footage was of people on their hands and knees shouting peaceful protest, and yet the police were still standing over them or pushing them forwards. It's building increasing distrust in the police, that they're there to protect us and uphold our civil rights, when actually the opposite is being demonstrated across amateur video, across social media. And it's worrying scenes because they have to answer to that. They can't, okay, we can look at video footage like that and it can be taken quite easily out of context, but we have to know what the crack actually is, what the truth behind it is. An investigation has to be done, and it has to be thorough, and it has to be independent. And if the police have questions to answer after that, then they need to answer that, because they're not going to win the trust of the public back without that.
No, definitely not. I guess I think the police are in a precarious position when both the left and the right are becoming heavily critical of their actions. I think they've got to do something to regain some trust. I don't know exactly what that's going to be, but I definitely agree on that. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, follow me on Twitter, or sign up to our mailing list. Thanks a lot to our sponsor, ExpressVPN, the #1 most trusted VPN. Get lightning fast connectivity with servers in 160 locations across 94 countries. Keep your browsing privacy safe with ExpressVPN. and get a 35% discount on 12 months of ExpressVPN when you follow the link in the description below. Don't forget my book is now out and available to order on Amazon and on bookshop.org. That's Brexit, the Establishment Civil War. And most importantly, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.